So I represent ECOS, the European Coalition on Standards. For those of you who aren't, the Environmental Coalition on Standards, apologies, even I get confused. For those who aren't aware of ECOS, we were established 20 years ago to ensure an environmental voice in the standardizations process, in the setting standards, be they at, in particular, European and international level. For those of you who follow the standardizations process in SEN, you know, you can understand that sometimes it's dominated a lot by incumbent operators, and we're there to make sure the environmental perspective is heard. I joined ECOS 6 months ago, leading our work on buildings and industry. And I think also relevant for the few remarks I'll make today, I have a second role on the Climate Change Advisory Council in Ireland, which is the body established to advise the government on climate policy. And like anyone advising national governments on climate policy today, that understandably means discussing a lot energy policy, energy security, and how Ireland can continue to heat its homes in the years ahead in a situation where fossil gas is becoming increasingly scarce, increasingly expensive, and increasingly untenable in its use in the context of our growing climate crisis. So I've been asked today to speak on how to reduce demand reduction in the building sector, covering both residential and commercial. I think a few figures stick out as quite relevant in this. 40% of buildings are connected to gas, and many member states are continuing to connect, including my own in Ireland, are continuing to connect new buildings to fossil gas, despite the enormous problems that presents in terms of energy security and financial security for homes. At 40%, the residential sector is the largest source of gas consumption in Europe, even larger than industry. Though we know there are many more technologies available to remove gas from heating in residential sectors than there are in heat, but I'll come on to that in some of my remarks shortly. It's no surprise then that the International Energy Agency has called for a ban on fossil boilers in 2025. I was discussing this with a colleague and he disagreed slightly with how I presented this, but I think Europe has gotten lucky this winter in the temperatures we've had and our capacity to fill up our gas storage before Russia started cutting off its gas over the course of the summer. But ultimately, the system we've been using to keep people warm for decades now needs to be fundamentally changed. It's not a case of taking out one input and replacing it over a long period. 20-year renovations, marginally more efficient technologies. There needs to be a fundamental change to how we heat our buildings in Europe. And that includes at all levels, the energy system we operate in Europe, the building system, how we build, what we build with, and the product level, the products we're putting into buildings to keep them warm and keep them cool. For all this to be achieved, we need to make sure that the European and national policies are closely aligned, provide clarity to industry and individuals and consumers and households, and that the ambition is scaled up higher than it currently is. So as I said, it requires a combination of European level and national level policies. So what do they look like? At a European level, we have two big tools we can be using to drive down gas demand in the building sector. The first is the Ecodesign tool, and the second is the Energy Performance Buildings Directive. Ecodesign has been proven to be an incredibly effective tool at European level to increase efficiency and to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels for a whole range of products. And it's why the EU is in the process of expanding that Ecodesign tool to much further parts of our economy, including textiles and different industrial products. We're working very closely with Ecodesign, and we think the best use it can be put to is ultimately to phase out the use of standalone fossil fuel boilers. And I know this topic was raised in one of the earlier sessions as to how we can phase these out and whether that's possible. The EU is aiming for a 2029 phase out, where we have combined with a number of other actors in the sector, heat pump manufacturers, electricity providers for a much earlier phase out than 2029. And we think we can reduce fossil fuel gas consumption by 8% by having an earlier phase out of standalone boilers. And I think it's important to understand why we want to do that and what is the level of ambition. It's not just standalone boilers for individual homes, but needs to be standalone boilers for large buildings as well, apartment blocks, commercial buildings. We need to understand that when there's a choice between direct electrification or continuing down with routes such as biogas or hydrogen, that for a whole range of reasons, the direct electrification is the much more correct choice, even if it represents a much bigger system change to how we're currently heating our buildings. And I was struck recently by one paper I read, which found that in the industrial sector, where temperatures needed are sometimes 14 or 1500 degrees Celsius, we have or are close to having the technologies available to directly electrify industrial heat. So we have the technologies to directly electrify industrial heat, which is huge scale of heat requirements. We undoubtedly have the capacity to directly electrify home heating and commercial heating and residential and large residential. And I think we need to be clear on the various vulnerabilities we'll give to households and businesses if we go down the path of biogas and hydrogen. For biogas, we're all aware of the huge competition it can present with food and agricultural systems. But we should also be aware of the vulnerabilities it presents to households and businesses. Biogas is either imported or can be imported, which leaves us once again at the vulnerability of developments outside of Europe, or it is produced from the agricultural sector, which itself is vulnerable to climate change developments. So it doesn't make sense to continue to leave us vulnerable to the fluctuating prices that would come with a reliance on biogas, even if it was a good idea to go on the biogas route, which it isn't. On the hydrogen side, we know there is huge cost implications from going down the path of hydrogen, incredible inefficiencies, and huge issues around storage and transportation. Any leakage of hydrogen acts as a greenhouse gas, combines with methane, and worsens our climate problem. So we talk about technological neutrality, and I think that sometimes that's used as a means of defending the status quo and lowering ambition. Technology neutrality has a role to play, but when there's such a clear case for direct electrification, we should take that path of direct electrification and leave behind those who are trying to maintain the status quo in their existing models with an excess reliance on biogas and hydrogen. So that's the Ecodesign revision. We're hopeful that the EU can match that level of ambition and go further. On the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, we do have a serious problem of ambition when it comes to what member states think is the correct reaction. Last December, the European Commission published a revision of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, calling for ambitious renovation standards for buildings across the continent to try and phase out the most inefficient buildings by the end of this decade. Member states took a look at that idea and rejected it. Their view was that, well, these are individual homes, these are individual buildings. Who are we to tell homeowners that they have to renovate the most inefficient buildings? I think that's a very narrow approach to the problem. I think anyone who's owning the most inefficient buildings, be they residential or commercial, are putting an enormous cost on our societies, be they a cost of energy security or a cost of climate policy. I don't think it's acceptable that in the 2020s, anyone has the right to own an F or G rated building. You may have the financial means to heat it yourself. You may be indifferent to the cost of the tenant who rents that building. But ultimately, 7 years after the Paris Agreement has been signed, the year Russia has invaded and upended our energy system, we need to make it very clear that the era of low energy efficiency buildings has to rapidly come to an end. And member states need to put in place support measures for those renovations and also penalties for homeowners. It's not acceptable when we've got so many households and businesses across Europe vulnerable to rising costs of heating, that member states have sided essentially with landlords and people who are sitting on energy efficient buildings. And that's the path they've chosen. Likewise, we've seen some other worrying developments in member states. And one example of this is the definition of zero emission buildings. I think when it comes to the sort of systems change we need, the manufacturers, businesses, anyone active in the space would benefit from greater clarity as to what a zero emission building is. And simply moving the emissions from offsite, perhaps offsite to the generation of the use of biofuels, the use of gas and district heating, we need a much clearer definition of zero emission buildings so that zero means zero, be it on-site heat generation or off-site heat generation. And we need the target for zero emission buildings to come in much earlier than 2030. We can't afford to wait 8 more years for that definition to be imposed. And then finally, on whole life carbon, we need to broaden this concept of a zero emission building to not just be the operational, but also the embodied carbon as well, because we know the production of cement and steel has huge climate implications for Europe, climate and energy security implications. So these are the tools we need at a European level. It's the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, it's the Ecodesign. These have been proven to be effective in the past. They need to have their ambition increased. But European policies can only get us so far. We need governments at national level to complement ambitious EU measures through effective strategies at national level. The situation in Ireland is sobering. Irish homes emit almost 60% more CO2 than average homes in Europe. If you've ever had to rent or live in a house in Ireland, you'll know why. The renovation rates are low. The building standards for many of the buildings built in the first decade of this century were extremely low. The government now has an ambitious target for the end of this decade of installing 60,000 heat pumps by 2030. It's a huge number, 400,000 in existing buildings. It's a huge share of the Irish building stock, requiring many families to change how they heat their homes. Despite this huge target in Ireland, we have public utilities which are going effectively the other direction. We have our Gas Networks Ireland operators of the gas grid connecting 8,000 more homes to the gas grid in 2021. We've installed that, and that actually exceeds the number of heat pumps installed in Ireland last year. So we're actually connecting more homes to the gas grid than we are installing heat pumps. And that shows that it's not enough just to support the new technology. You also need a huge systems change going into governance, going into your public utilities, going into your building standards, and providing the sort of clear prohibitions on new gas hookups, reforming your state agencies, setting clear end dates. Because as I said, 7 years after Paris, the year when Russian gas has been turned off to Europe, it's not acceptable for a public utility to continue to connect homes to the gas grid. And of course, to complement this upgrading of heat pumps and renovation, we need a huge change in retraining and skills. But when it comes to that issue of skills, material, governments need to support it, but they also need to support it with very clear objectives and rules so that everyone in the sector knows what's coming down the tracks. So to conclude, we have a clear pathway. We know we can heat buildings using electricity, direct electrification. We know it has huge benefits in terms of energy security, in terms of financial security. We know those benefits exceed trying to heat homes through biogas and hydrogen, and certainly fossil gas. We have the tools, we have the targets. What we need is for governments, be they acting in their capitals or when they are coming to Brussels or Strasbourg to legislate, to substantially increase their ambition. So this is the ECOS perspective on it. It's my perspective as somebody active at national level and worrying about Ireland's energy security as our domestic gas supplies are wound down. My colleagues Mike and Marco are here as well today, and they're also active on these files as well. Mike on EPPD and Marco somewhere in the room, I think, on the Ecodesign. So feel free to come up and talk to us more during the coffee break. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a moment, Andrew, we will take also perhaps a couple of questions because we do not have any specific QA session. So any questions or comments to Andrew? Yes, please. I think, yeah, we need to use a microphone.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks. My name is Pedro Diaz from Solidarity Europe. I'm a bit disappointed that you didn't refer renewable heat once. And I'm also would like to understand what you mean by direct electrification, because the way I understand direct electrification for heating in particular is any form of heat coming from electricity, including those that we see more present in the market, which are very cheap to buy, but extremely expensive to operate, from wall-mounted radiators to infrared heat solutions and so on. So, but I assume that's not what you mean by direct electrification, but I would like to clarify if possible.
Yeah, sure. In terms of direct electrification, the most credible mechanism today is heat pumps because of the physics of taking the existing heat in the atmosphere rather than trying to generate it from, as you say, electric space heaters, which can be proven incredibly ineffective. Yes, I am skeptical of renewable heat because I've looked at some of the sourcing in terms of biofuels and the various issues with those. And I think we shouldn't look at this as just trying to solve the problem of climate. but also trying to solve the problem of climate and biodiversity. And the issue we always run up to when it comes to bioenergy is we're asking land to do a lot, not just solve climate change, but also protect biodiversity. And this year, I think the event was moved to Canada, but we're in the process of developing a Paris-style agreement for biodiversity. And one of the commitments many European governments have made is to set aside more of their land for purposes of biodiversity, so kind of leaving it off the grid for bioenergy development. And the only way bioenergy development has worked in Europe in the last 10 or 15 years is through increased agricultural intensification. And that increased agricultural intensification has had a very negative impact on biodiversity. So if there may be some case for bioenergy in very limited sectors, such as aviation or shipping, where direct electrification is proving a bit more challenging. But fundamentally, if you think you can directly electrify through heat pumps, then you should go for that, because the expectation that the land can do all this around bioenergy, I don't think is tenable if you combine the climate and biodiversity crises.
Okay, thank you very much. There is one more question. Yes, I myself need to run.
Thank you for your presentation. My name is Oliver Jung. I work for GCP Europe, which is the European Association of Mechanical Contractors, Building Service Engineers, Plumbers, and HVAC installers. And I hear your high level of ambition concerning the transition towards electrification. What are your views concerning the skills that would be needed in order to get to the implementation, the actual implementation of such level of ambition, and what specific claims or requests do you have to policymakers with that regard? Thank you.
I think in this regard, one of the best decisions made by the Irish government was to create a ministry for education beyond high school, and for that ministry to focus not just on university education, but skills training, and opening a series of skills training centers around Ireland for exactly this purpose. I think for whole aspects of the green economy, not just heating, there needs to be a much bigger focus on developing the new skills among workers, retraining people. And my own experience working with some of these sectors in the Irish building sector is that they are open to this more so than I think other parts of the Irish economy. I think they recognize that in 5 or 10 years time, or sooner, I would hope, it's not going to be possible to install new gas boilers. So I think there is, from my own interaction, there is a genuine openness to this. But I think setting up those skills centers, and also just making sure there's clarity, so people know when those bans are going to come in, so they know what kind of regulatory framework they're working with. I think those are the best kind of steps national governments can take.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. And now we really need to proceed to our next speaker. So Philippe Riviere is the next one. Speaking about the Ecodesign and coming from the DG Energy. So please, the floor is yours.
Yep. Can you hear me now? It's okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. This one is exactly. So good afternoon, my name is Philippe Riviere. I'm working with the European Commission in the same unit as Paula Garcia this morning. It's a unit that takes care of the energy efficiency of buildings and products, and I'm in the product team. And in the product team, we are dealing with European regulation to improve the energy efficiency of 2 types, which were introduced by Andrew before. So the Ecodesign regulation and the energy labeling regulation, and I will explain how it works. And in particular, in this presentation, I will talk about heating and also other HVAC products. Yes. This is stage. Yeah. So Ecodesign regulation are what is called generally standards and energy labeling labels, so standards labeled program elsewhere in the world. So how it works, to push the efficiency. We put minimum requirements on the lowest efficient product on the market. And it goes in combination with a label that shows to the end users the information on the relative efficiency between the worst and the best product. And this combination of the two effects allows to transform the market and to steer to the most efficient product. And so that's what we are talking about. And this already exists for some time, and there are clear benefits that we have evaluated and that are not always well known. So it's it's very important, about 1,000 terawatt-hour primary energy in 2020, and it is just increasing because of the renewing of the stock of products. And in this, all these savings, of course, a very large, very important part is in the heating and the HVAC in general, but most particularly in the heating of heating appliances, and mostly used in buildings. So as per 2020, it's already about 7% of the EU primary energy consumption that has been saved, with an impressive amount of CO2 equivalent savings and also economical savings per household. So this is the past. This is the regulation we have already implemented in the past. So for instance, for heating, for the sector of boilers and water heating, the last regulation was implemented in 2013 and have still effects today. So if we look at this regulation, so the main one is for hydronic systems. So this covers about 45% of EU buildings. And we are talking about mainly boilers and a small part of heat pumps. Solid fuel boilers are in another regulation. And we have also a couple of regulations on local space heater that would be typically electric heating, but also wood stoves. And I will speak more particularly of these two regulations because they are being revised, and we are presently discussing what could be the new label and what could be the new minimum performance requirements for these products. So if we start with the local room heating, we have made the easy part, I would say. In the past, we had basically 5 scales, meaning that we had almost a scale per product. So every type of industry was allowed to improve its products to the top level. But now if we want to have further savings, we need to combine all this on a single scale to be able to compare the energy efficiency of worst energy products, most efficient energy products, and best energy efficient energy products. So in that sequence, you can see that you have on the right side the heat pumps. All is this in its primary energy efficiency, with the sense of the EED that we discussed this morning. So because of the fact that heat pumps are mobilizing ambient energy, they are much more efficient in total. And this is for a primary energy efficiency factor of 2.1. That is what is presently in the EED. So the heat pumps are in total much more efficient, while electric heating would be at the bottom, and combustion appliances would be under 100%. So if we combine all this on a single scale, we know that there are some people looking at choosing among these different systems, and so we can have much higher savings when there is a substitution. Doesn't mean that all products will be substituted, doesn't mean that it's forbidden to use wood, but there are savings in the substitution more than in increasing each product by its own. If we look at hydronic space heaters, so we can first take a look at on the left. That's the scale translated with the new primary energy, primary energy factor. That's the scale that is presently in force today. And here you have an idea of the distribution of products. Huh? So you can see that this big pack yellow is the condensing boiler. And in fact, the previous regulation, the main objective of the previous regulation was to shift from non-condensing to condensing boilers. And you can see the results on the side that was very efficient. And this was done through minimum performance requirements. But the thing is that now the policy objectives have changed. We are moving to the Fit for 55, and clearly we cannot keep this large part of gas boiler on the market and in the stock. We have to shift to more efficient solution. That could be hybrid solution, that could be heat pumps, that could be cogeneration, but it has to be more efficient, or we will not make the objective that we have for 2030. So the next target is in fact to remove condensing boilers, the same boiler that we have pushed on the market for the last 10 years. That's the way it is. And so what we are discussing now is a mandatory rescaling. I say mandatory because we have to do it anyway, but the rescaling would be to put the A to the level of the F, and so close to the bottom of the scale. Of course, it has been discussed for quite a while. We have opened the discussion in 2017, so it's not easy to be done. In the present context, it might evolve a bit faster, maybe. And we also have to reorientate the subsidies. So this morning in the PBD presentation, it has been said that we had to stop subsidizing fossil fuels. In fact, there is an article in the labeling regulation that already says that subsidies by member states should be reserved to the top classes, the most significantly populated classes at the top. And so we have to implement this more strongly in the coming years to push heat pumps and other more efficient products. But we had already a scale in place comparing different products, and this label has not allowed to have heat pumps on the market. So we were missing some other conditions to push the transformation to more efficient products. And one important point is the installers. For these specific space heaters, we know that the opinion of the installer and the advice of the installer is crucial for the end user. We need, of course, to have the economical conditions in place. It means to correct the gas and electricity ratio, to include the carbon price in the electricity prices, and also, at least temporarily, to develop targeted subsidy or loan schemes for more efficient appliances. And also, we need to try to avoid any distortion of the functioning of the internal market, because in our opinion, it's the best way that we have to steer the heat pump costs down. And so it means that we have to avoid any particular national schemes that would regard additional testing, additional barriers that would limit the functioning of the internal markets. And it also means that we have to look closely on how the different member states will choose to decarbonize their buildings, and in particular, how they will use the new provisions that are being inserted in the EPBD on the possible ban or limitation of heating systems in Article 11. And so this is the last point, and probably a very important point. This is the fact that for a few months now, we have a provision in the REPowerEU communication that proposed to the Commission to test the hypothesis of putting a horizontal minimum energy performance system, so MEPS, at 110%, meaning that it would ban standalone boilers for a date, so a second year in the future in the regulation. So nowadays we are in the process, the legislative process. We have an impact assessment that we are validating internally, and to say if it's possible or not, and then we will go back to stakeholders to discuss if it's possible, how it can be implemented. But anyway, these are complex regulations, so we will need more consultation in the beginning of next year, most likely, both on space heaters and also probably on local space heaters. So thank you very much. If you have any question.
Well, thank you. So there is a time for a couple of questions. So yes, Pedro, please start. Maybe I can start. There was this micro CHP in some slides and at quite high level efficiency. So what's the fuel for this one? Is it hydrogen, or how it is calculated, or is it operated with natural gas, this type of appliances?
Yes, it is operated with natural gas. In fact, what we have on the market would probably be less efficient because this is a combination of a gas boiler and a micro CHP. But if you, these are the figures for the micro CHP alone, and it can be very efficient. So then it's also a design of how the product is put on the market.
But then additional question, if it is operated with natural gas, when it is a fossil fuel and it will be banned by EPBD from new buildings. So in the efficiency scale, it can be quite high still, but maybe you want to comment also this.
So these are, we are working with the internal markets regulation. So the energy is a shared competence with the member states. We cannot regulate the fuels, huh? So we just regulate the product efficiency. And so it's complementary in a way, but we cannot say that products that use this type of fuel cannot be on the market. That cannot work.
Okay, then Pedro, please.
That's simple. Is which factor do you compare for when you compare gas, natural gas and electricity? Which factor do you use? Are fixed or?
Yeah, it's a fixed factor. For now, in the present regulation, it's 2.5. It was proposed to be 2.1. In fact, we follow what is in the EED. Yeah? So it's 2.1 in the EED, and they are moving to 1.9. So we could end up with 1.9. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And one more for Livia.
You said before efficiency, which is
okay. You said before that you compare it based on the technical efficiency of each kind of equipment you are taking into consideration, but efficiency is based on energy, not on primary energy. If you're using primary energy, of course, will depend on the conversion factor. And still on the convection factor, there is no convergency among Europe. We have different conversion factor in each country. Then the labeling doesn't work because what have you used then as conversion factor? The Italian is different than the French one, it's different than the Finnish one.
So EU policies are based on the average. That's what we do, and we use for that Eurostat value to determine average primary energy factor to convert electricity final energy in primary energy equivalents with a lot of conventions indeed. But
sometimes energy price is very good factor to be used, but yes, Philippe, thanks a lot for this presentation, and I think we need to move on. So our final presentation before the panel will be by Tomasz Cholewa, and he is coming from Poland and will speak about deep energy renovation. Tomasz also chaired the task force preparing a guidebook on this topic, so please go on.
Thank you, Jarek. So my name is Tomasz Cholewa, and I come here from Poland, and where I work at the Lublin University of Technology. I am also a professional engineer in frame of designing and supervising on a building site. So I have also a really technical background regarding engineering duties in a building site. So we all know that European Commission communicated about Green Deal, renovation wave, REPower. We know that almost all building will be also, which exists today, will be also in 2050. So we should somehow decarbonize this amount of buildings. And we also notice that there are some barriers. So we do not know what kind of benefits we should expect from renovation. There is also lack of trust in actual energy savings in renovation. And also there is lack of technical and clear and cost-effective concept to how to decarbonize the buildings. Okay, so we also know that we should include as much aspects as possible to properly move to the carbon neutral buildings. I think that energy renovation of building envelope is quite well known for us. However, how to renovate a HVAC system is also quite clear for engineers. But we also should include education of users. Yes, we should include users in the process of energy management in buildings. And after, when we decrease the energy consumption, we should use renewable energy sources, yes, somehow. So I noticed, especially in Poland, that we largely focus on building envelope energy renovation. However, how to modernize the existing heating system and how this kind of modernization, energy modernization influence the final energy consumption is not well known, and it could be somehow reached from the field measurements which we already made and presented in frame of this guidebook. So we proposed the first step to how to decrease the energy consumption in existing buildings, because we know that in new buildings you can make a lot of things, but in an existing building it is quite challenging aspects. So in the frame of this guidebook, which is a consensus, somehow consensus guidelines among different members, yes, prepared by different members from different countries. It was around 10 countries, also from, it was Nordic countries from South, so it is quite consensus issue. And we addressed all HVAC systems which are present in the buildings, how to decrease the energy consumption in specific systems. So we address ventilation, we address heating sources, we address heating system, domestic hot water, and also cooling. And also underlined how education influences this process and how it should be included in this process. So the step one, which is described in details in this guidebook, is how to decrease the final energy consumption in the buildings, taking into account the best available solutions, how to minimize the payback time of proposed solutions, and how to minimize the realization time, because it is really important that the measures, the energy efficient measures which you propose in the buildings should be realized as quick as possible. Sorry. So taking this into account, we can have some kind of strategies, but also we should, especially in existing buildings, we should also take into account the needs of building managers and building owners. So this, what we propose, should be easy implemented within existing buildings and taking into account existing HVAC system in order to maybe save some of them. Do not change everything, yes. So also we should propose measures which are characterized by short implementation time, short payback time, and if possible, our solutions should be easy replicable in another buildings similars, because then another buildings manager may decide quite fast how to apply such a system. It will be such a pilot cases. Yes, it will be also good practice. So in frame of this guidebook and our activities, we proposed and show approach, holistic approach, which can be applied in this case in existing buildings. We also demonstrated this based on a long-term case studies, which is a very valid issue, yes, because in frame of simulations you can prove something, yes, but take into account results from long-term field measurements, long-term field studies. It is quite very important issue. And also we know that in different countries you can have different renovation concepts. So that's why what we presented there, it is of a general issue. So you can apply such a measures in different renovation concepts. So it is also quite important. So second step, now when we have and when we propose how to decrease the final energy consumption, will be how to move to renewable energy sources, and also different aspects will be here addressed, because we establish also the international team. Task force members are from different countries, and these are 14 experts with different background. So not only HVAC system professionals, but also experts from renewable energy sources, from indoor environment quality, indoor air quality, and also education of users. So it will be also quite good consensus reports which we will prepare. So the planet outcomes the first outcome will be the short report on how to move from natural gas to heat pumps, district heating, and hybrid solution especially in existing buildings. And also we plan different other reports which will address the needs of HVAC system professionals. And at the end, we plan a guidebook, which will be a consensus guidelines, but it is a future, yes, and we plan at the end of 2024. Regarding the first report, what may be also interesting for you, because it is quite hot topic now. We plan to, besides some to first section of introduction, we plan to present the overview of existing heating system and hot water, so HVAC system, which are supplied by a gas. And after we provide what kind of possibilities are to replace the gas in existing buildings. By this process, we also underline very important needs to really adduce the new sources to existing system. So we also tackled the power of new heat sources, how to lower the supply temperature of the heating medium, how to use the weather-based or forecast control of such a system in order to increase by this energy efficiency, and also how to limit heat losses in frame of heating and domestic hot water system. And this will be presented also supported by specific schemas, which will be clear and I think helpful for practitioners such as designers of such a system, so of such a modernization in existing buildings. So concluding, I think that we should, as much as possible, influence important stakeholders that they should underline our role in this process, yes, because you know that energy used in buildings is used by HVAC system mainly. So that's why it is our role how to decrease the energy consumption. So the step one, it was regarding energy efficient renovation of existing buildings, should be made, in our opinion, as a first one in order to properly decarbonize the building. And after use naturally specific renewable energy sources which are technically and economically supported in a specific location of a building according to specific local policies. So, and the last point is that we will try to assist our colleagues from HVAC system professionals in this process, so the process of decarbonization of existing buildings. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tomasz. Any fast questions to Tomasz? Yes, yeah, please.
Thank you, Tomasz. I always am oversensitive for a statement like short payback time, because we all know, well, first the question is what is short, but we all know that if you pick those short payback time measures, you will block the next measures, because the next measures will be, of course, more expensive in your economic calculations. So is it not better to oblige to make a total renovation plan towards zero carbon? And okay, you have to rank all measures and there are prices, but then you are sure that you inform your client that it is not well, something you can pick your nice fruits out. You have to do them all.
Okay, thank you for this question. It is quite challenging, yes, when you combine different renovation measures, what will be the latest energy savings level, and taking this into account, what will be the payback time of the full renovation. But in order, like I said before, to adjust to different renovation concepts which are valid in specific countries, because it's not one general renovation concepts, because we have some kind of subsidies in different countries. We developed and presented different measures specified by different payback times dedicated to the specific measures. Naturally, we proposed what should be done in what is recommended to be done in specific buildings. Yes, so naturally the payback time, it is good and is below 5 years. Yes, in most of our measures which we propose in this guidebook is below 5 years.
Yeah, this is indeed very short, but maybe energy prices can play some role also in these short payback times. But yes, what Jaap was pointing out, I think this is called like renovation passport in the EPBD, and this is also important topic. But yes, maybe as a final question for you, these technical solutions, would they include anything else than the heat pumps, or is it everything being based on the heat pumps? So do you see some other possible technical solutions in addition to the heat pumps to be included in this guidance?
I think naturally, yes, because heat pumps is not everything. Yes, we have also boilers which are supplied by biomass, by biogas. We have also district heating system, which, for example, in Poland is now developed a district heating system which is fully supplied from renewable energy sources. So when we have carbon neutral heat in a district heating system, so it is a future. Yes, we have 27 years to make this process.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. And yes, we need to proceed to our distinguished panel discussion. So I am inviting the moderator, Anita, and all the distinguished panelists, Ilari, Céline, Carré, Tomasz, yes, you can stay on the stage, Henk Ranneberg, Philippe Riviere, and Christian Schauer. So for the panelists, yes, please take a seat, and you are free to select it. And then, yes, Anita will take over. So
thank you very much. I need a strong neighbor. Oh, switch on. Thank you for the panelists. While you are sitting down, I am approaching and this side. There is no more room on the stage, so I will just be close to you. So I would like to welcome our panelists, expert panels, which is representatives of REHVA supporter companies and policymakers and yeah, experts in the field of design. We chose this title of the panel because we are here after COP27, first of all, with the highest ever number of fossil fuel lobbyists participating, as you might have heard. And we have, let's say, some controversial political ambitions, whether what is the goal regarding fast decarbonization or fossil fuel phase out in our buildings and heating and cooling systems. So I would like to discuss or focus this discussion on we have these ambitions and we all agree on that it must to be, we need to do it for our climate and for our future, but we have a very critical period as well regarding the latest energy crisis that we have. So that's why we invited our panelists with a short introduction so you can see the affiliations, but I go through them. Ilari, who is here also, with different hats, hopefully in discussion, so representing Uponor, but also part of industry associations for heating and even active in the World Green Building Council. We have here Céline Carré, who represents here in this panel EuroACE and the Renovate Europe campaign via this association. Then Henk Kranenberg from Daikin, as a producer of a manufacturer and producer of solutions and equipment. Christian Schauer, who is the director of a knowledge center of Viega, covering the domestic hot water installation part of the discussion. And then you heard already the introduction to Philippe from the DG Energy in charge of the Ecodesign regulations and developments, and Tomasz Cholewa from our Building Decarbonisation Task Force. So I would like to kindly ask you first as panelists to give some short reactions and statements on what you heard today, and in general on the general topic of how can we phase out fossil fuel from heating and cooling, and by the way, domestic hot water installations. Thank you. And we could maybe start just around like here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Anita. There is a risk that this might end up not being a short statement, so just shut me up if I take too long on this topic. Before I say what I say, I would just like to point out that I'm personally a dedicated and devoted proponent of heat pumps. I spent most of the 90s and early 2000s helping to create the market for heat pumps in Finland. Now we are where we are. Having said that, first of all, you took the main punchline out of my message out in your introduction. It's not about can we phase out fossil fuels, we must phase out. Everybody agrees. The industry agrees, the building owners agree, everybody agrees. I'm personally a bit skeptical of a one solution route to phasing out fossil fuels. And the reason I'm skeptical is not because I wouldn't believe that the industry is perfectly capable of delivering enough heat pumps to service all of Europe and the world. I'm worried because I haven't seen a discussion on the impacts of that transition on the national and European grids and the capacity of the grid and the investment related to that. I haven't seen a discussion on how are we going to manage the completely different peak power demand to electrical energy consumption ratio over the year, which is going to make some of the production capacity of electricity highly uneconomical. What will the impact on the electricity price of that be? Maybe I'm just uneducated and I haven't seen the answers to this, but this is what I'm sort of worried about. One obvious thing, and this was touched, I think, by all the presentations already, this will not ever happen in a feasible way without dramatically investing in demand reduction at the same time. So we need to go back to the famous energy efficiency first principle before even worrying about where does the energy come from. There's no way of satisfying all the current and growing future demand just by renewables. We need to seriously limit the future demand as we go forward. And the third statement is all of this needs to happen in a socially acceptable manner, because we are already now, not only because of the energy crisis, but already earlier, we've been in a situation where not everyone is able to pay their heating bills, let alone pay the costs of improving the property that they live in. And the worst that this can lead to is civil unrest and you know, public opinion turning against all the things that we all know have to be done anyway.
Thank you very much, Henk. Ilari, very good start. So Henk, now it's up to you to
Okay, thank you very much, Ilari. Thank you also very much, because it's, of course, a lot of these things in general sense, they are, I think everybody agrees to that. So that is not, there's not such a discussion item, I think. And for me, it's in fact a no-brainer that in fact we can, within the coming years, get rid of fossil fuels for heating. And on purpose, I don't mention cooling, because in fact, fossil fuels used for cooling is negligible. So this is an area that I think should be addressed differently. But can we achieve the REPowerEU targets? I think that's another thing. And I think some items are already raised. And I think it depends on the number of things. That it's for me also a no-brainer that we can have a tremendous cutting in the CO2 emissions by adopting the REPowerEU targets. And okay, probably a large part will be the heat pumps, as it's also specified in the program, but there are all kinds of other solutions as well. And I think this technological neutral approach is always very good. It's not about we have now a pie and let's try to get the biggest piece out of it. No, let's go for the sustainable environment. That is very clear. What worries me more is that we don't end up with penny-wise, pound-foolish solutions. That we start up with activities that are infringing with the targets we are setting, which are our long-term ambitions. And long-term, in fact, it's not even long-term, because then by 2030, if we want to deliver 30 million or 50 or 60 million heat pumps, just a few figures to show. It depends on what type of heat pumps you include and how it will be brought to the market. But that's a huge amount, and that is costing a huge effort from the complete sector, not only from the industry, but also all the installers, everybody who's involved in it, and also from the policy makers. And in that sense, I also like to refer to that part, because if I see what is going on in the legislative framework, that can cause roadblocks, and we should take care about it. Ecodesign is one of them. We see that now the next steps are coming up, and this may facilitate further the implementation of heat pumps. But we should not forget that whatever we are doing on that in that field is also eating engineering capacity and time, and engineering capacity is limited. So we have to be very careful on, okay, what will be implemented by when? Is there sufficient introduction time? If we jeopardize the market by suddenly raising new requirements in a couple of years' time, then a lot of capacity has to go there, and that capacity will not go into production expansion. So all these kind of things will happen. And that is, of course, we don't talk about eco-design. It's the what is called the Ecodesign Sustainable Product Regulation. I always have to read again what's the exact wording. But of course, it's bringing in a new dimension again on the digital passport. And how effective is it? Will it really contribute to our environment within the upcoming 5 to 10 years? So when is this all required? So this is what I mean with penny wise, pound foolish. What is really delivering the best results to the market? Another one, I think, is very an obvious one, is the current F-gas discussion going on. Yes, if we say, okay, now we cut F-gas, and from tomorrow onwards, it has, or tomorrow, then in 2-3 years' time, it shall not be any F-gases anymore. Forget then about the 30 million heat pumps. Perhaps we will not even achieve 10% out of that. So we have to be very careful on what is realistic, what is the time to market. Also, when politics comes with other regulations around, what is achievable. And of course, Some companies will say, yes, please come up, because for them it's a business case, it's the business opportunity. But it's not about the individual company. This is about our society and how can we achieve it as a group, as a total. This is not about a one-by-one company idea and best position they have. No, this is about how can we achieve this target. So then the F-gas can clearly infringe on that, including further on the life cycle assessment. Well, many things are going around there. We have some standards that are available now in the operational phase of the heat pump. If you have flammable refrigerants, like R32 is already full in use in the market. But what about the highly flammable refrigerants? And not just looking at operational side, but also at the logistics, at all the transportations around, at the demolition phase, taking them out of the market. So there are so many things that have to be solved together. So if we stop too quick, it may cut the targets to be achieved by the REPowerEU. And another one I think is relevant is it's in fact also coming from Ecodesign. So sorry about that, Philippe, but it's on the compensation test method that is proposed now, which is most likely getting into force on lot 1 for the smaller appliances. It means, okay, I will take care, I will not talk too long, sorry. But these are all factors that have an impact, but also looking at the route to market. It's the installers, the capable installation capacity that is relevant, where we have to take care. But also we have to look into, and it was referred to just in the presentation before, lock-in effects that may come up, not only from a technical side, but also from a legislative side. So I will not go into details because otherwise it would take far too much time. And I was a bit surprised also to see from Ireland the presentation before, okay, we are still using a lot of gas boilers, but we also see examples like what we saw in the Netherlands. By 2026 it's not allowed anymore to use standalone gas boilers. And if I hear all the discussion going around, I think, yes, why is it possible in some markets and why not in others? So why don't we line up these kind of activities to make sure that we are going to achieve the REPowerEU sessions? So in fact, to wrap up, let's act pound-wise and not penny foolish.
Thank you. It was also a good last sentence for Céline. Yeah. How can we spread around at the European scale actually?
Yes.
The implementation of policies.
Thank you. Is that working? Yeah. Okay. Good. Thanks. So I'm here today with you, and thanks for having me on behalf of EuroACE, Energy Efficient Buildings, that values 15 industrial members active in the energy efficiency field, so from the building envelope, systems and controls. So, and we typically articulate a common voice for energy efficient policies in buildings. So you were saying what drives you. So what drives us today is really energy efficiency first. I think that we have still quite a big chunk of work on our plate, because in spite of the geopolitics, in spite of the economics, we still have quite a tough battle, especially in the current negotiations on the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. And that's quite striking that overall Europe, I think, has been spending since August 2021 around 4 or 5% of its GDP on subsidizing bills, so energy bills. At the same time, we find it harder to plan for structural measures to basically not have to do that anymore and not have to subsidize fossil fuels, basically. So that's it, quite tough. So we obviously, when you mention about how to speed up, how to decarbonize heat, how to accelerate, we in EuroACE are also firm believer in policy and in regulatory requirements. It's not just because it's fun, it's because in the sector, in the construction sector, that's the only thing that actually works, because it's not something that people do by themselves. And they are not necessarily also equipped to, I mean, me as a homeowner or anyone is not necessarily equipped to understand what needs to be done. So that's important. And also all of the different actors, and that's a very scattered world, needs to get a line on around something. So that's very important. It's important in our work. And we start with getting the big picture on new builds, but also on existing buildings. And that the topic, I mean, the elephant in the room is the topic of minimum energy performance standards, which as such is going to be a driver for all of our technologies. I mean, all of the technologies we represent in EuroACE, both from the building envelope, insulation, windows, and including heat pumps, which was the question, is part of that. So the question on the ban on fossil fuels is definitely something that has to be part of our regulatory landscape. But then, as it was mentioned, the different starting points in Europe make it something that needs to be worked out in details for different segments and for different building types at the national level. And for that, I would mention also two tools that we have been working on for many years, and that still needs to be, let's say, leveraged in terms of their impact, which is those long-term renovation strategies. So now they're going to change name again, national building renovation plans. This is where that work has to happen, on which buildings to prioritize and what to do next. And still that work has to be much more granular and impactful. What's come back from those strategies is still too vague, does not enable our sector to plan ahead by, for example, on existing buildings, where and how many buildings to renovate in the next 5 or 10 years. It's still far too vague for the preparedness that our sector needs to go through, also for training people. So yeah, a big focus on those future national building renovation plans. And then, and I was glad it was mentioned, building renovation passports or individual renovation roadmap are very important, because this is where you get the buy-in of people. This is where they can plan ahead. This is where they can map out when they're going to change their heating systems, and in articulation with the buildings. And I think that is also something, it could sound a little bit administrative, but it is something that is an enabler for the people to get interest and to understand, and it can be simplified. We have tools, we have apps. I mean, here in Belgium, there are very nice examples of those individual building renovation roadmaps. It can also align the different jobs of the different people that are going to intervene in the building, and that's very important. And also, I would conclude with that, it can help also orientate subsidies to what needs to be done in buildings over the next 5 to 10 years, including reduction of energy demand. And I'll jump on that in the next question. That energy needs is very important as well, and articulating that with decarbonized heat solution. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and thank you for shifting to this question of the existing building stock, because it's clearly we have to focus on that. So with that, I hand over to Christiane to have your take also in the context of the discussion so far and today.
Yes, I have the inconvenient part maybe, because I'm standing here for the domestic hot water. I explain it exactly what I mean. Domestic hot water is not so easy as a part of the energy saving we discussed today. So, you know, in a new energy standard, heating to domestic hot water is 50-50 or more. In existing buildings, we have 60% of domestic hot water. But if you look on the efficiency of heat pumps, you look on the temperature of 60-55 to domestic hot water, and that's not very useful for the efficiency and not very useful for the energy efficiency of the building. Today, somebody uses electric boilers or residential thermal stations with temperature down to 40 degrees in the maximum of Legionella growth. Maybe it can be a solution, but not a solution for the health protection. Then we have a gap and a limit between energy saving and the hygiene. You also look on the hygiene on the HVAC system for ventilation, air conditioning, because of the indoor quality. But you also have to look on the we have to look on the hygiene of the drinking water. So little topic about Legionella is that the incidence of Legionella is very high. You don't know, maybe. We have Legionnaire's disease with a high incidence and also a high incidence of Pontiac fever. So you have to look on these kind of bacteria. In Germany, we have a study about 5% of the people have antibodies against Legionella. That means more than 4 million people. So you have contact with that. 50% of this contact is by drinking water. 50% by cooling towers, maybe, you know. To achieve the goal, in Germany, we try to have a recharge program to go down with the temperature from 60-55 to 47-45 with hydraulic balance system, and also with a new technology to solve this problem and make heat pumps efficient. And the research program ends up in 2023. To have good experience with this. We have also pilot project in the field. Many of them, they works well with different companies in this research project. It goes about ultrafiltration in the circulation system. So this works very well. And now it seems that's possible to go down 13 Kelvin. Hygienic stability. Also the hygienic stability is the same at 60-54, 55, and it's the same as 13 Kelvin down. Yeah. And for the simulation of an energy efficiency, if you look on a building with 50-50 heating to hot water, you have energy saving of 25 up to 25% for this building, for existing buildings.
Thank you very much. So now I turn to the two members of the panelists. So what you, Philippe, what you heard from now, how can the Commission, you are not in an easy position, I understand, but you were left here by the colleague. How can this coordination between eventual overlapping or contradicting policies happen, and how do you see the perspective of these? Of course, with focus on the eco-design upcoming developments.
Yes, thank you. So on the building, I'm not very well positioned to talk about that, but on the products, I would say that we have to value the internal market. Our impression is that nowadays, for heat pumps and boilers, for the heating markets, they are really fragmented and more national markets than the European market. And if you want to, in fact, we need these new heating solutions to become more affordable so that they can diffuse, and this requires a fully functional internal market where you have real competition that helps to push the cost, the prices down, and this is, in my opinion, a very important point. And when I say that we are at the moment testing if we can implement what is in REPowerEU for boiler, it also means that we have to check that it becomes affordable and it's also cost efficient, because these are conditions for the regulation to work. So at some point in time, it has to become. So it also means that probably there needs to be economies of scale in this sector. And anyway, if this is not what our manufacturers do, probably the economy of scale will come from outside Europe. So it needs to be done. And if we want to embrace fully this transformation, and also that our economy grows, as was said before in the day, we need this internal market to work. That's what we're trying to do with the eco-design, and also discussing with our colleagues in the PBD to make sure that there are not contradicting objectives or means that are put in the decarbonization, in the way.
Thank you very much. And finally, Tomasz, from the perspective we heard about, the limits to engineering capacity, actually. So how do you see, coming back again to the renovation wave? So how can professionals prepare for that scale of increase and hopefully high quality energy, deep energy renovation projects?
So in my opinion, we should really have more action regarding education of the stakeholders which will take part in the future in this process of increasing the energy efficiency and increasing and to move to carbon neutral buildings, because we should provide them guidelines how to do it. So guidelines for designers, for installators, for building manager, for services company, because when we will proceed with this too fast, so generally we should change the heat sources, yes, especially for a building. But when we do it not properly, we can have problems. So such a project will be not realized in the all buildings in the neighborhoods. So when you have in one buildings very bad issue with such a installation, another buildings will not follow up probably. So and we will have problems. So especially that heat pumps are not so easy solution to apply in existing buildings, because in my opinion also we should save existing heating and hot water installations, because when we would like to exchange everything, it will be very hard to proceed in a practice.
Thank you very much. And now I'm looking at the time, so we are a bit over the time, but we started a little bit later. So I would like to ask the panelists, but now this time really a short statement as a closing statement. So what did you learn and how to achieve this objective of again, the as fast as possible phase out or phase down of fossil fuels in our heating system? What is the most important to do for your companies or your professions? Starting from Ilari.
If I knew what the most important thing to do was, I think I would be working for the Commission. No, seriously speaking, there's so many important things that I'm not going to pinpoint one. We need to move on all fronts. We need to move on technology development. Hank's point about the route to market is a fundamentally important one. We can impose whatever regulations we want. If we don't have the delivery capacity, we will always fail. And that brings me to the engineering and installation topic. I think in practice, one of the biggest bottlenecks we have is the installer capacity. The education of younger generation installers in sufficient numbers to deliver on the change in practice. I'm not too worried about engineering capacity, I have to say, because those are engineers are being trained, in my view, not sufficiently, but to high numbers anyway. Installers are not, and we already have a shortage of competent plumbers coming.
Thank you.
No, that's correct. I fully agree to that. Although I think also the engineering capacity is still a question mark. If I look at what's happening now, also if I look at our own investment program, starting up a new R&D center in Belgium, we have 400 then high qualified engineers have to be employed. New factory in Poland. How many workers have to be there? So in the coming year, already 4,000 more people we will need within the company, also to gear up towards the requirement for the European market. So these are massive investments that we are doing, but also realizing that in fact we need a lot of support, also from especially the countries themselves, and that we should get rid of the fight between the member states and Brussels. Can we agree or not? Because of all kinds of political reasons, but really try to focus on, okay, how are we going to achieve this REPowerEU campaign? How can we, in a proper way, valorize the effectiveness of heat pumps in these buildings, and not have, again, 27 different calculation routes with all kinds of local escapes and roadblocks. I think for us, it is very important that we really start to act as a united Europe. And this is for us a very important step. We are taking our responsibility. We hope everybody will do. Yes.
Yes, maybe one final big word is to go back to the principles. We mentioned energy efficiency first. And I said it's still not fully understood. And I think the climate agenda is quite high on our radar, at least this community. energy efficiency has so much to deliver on energy security and energy cost. And I think we need to have that big picture in mind. We're talking about, drivers to accelerate the deployment on certain technologies, installer and training. I mean, that needs to be much bigger in the next years and in the future Commission agenda for this sector. But also we're talking about affordability of solutions, then affordability of solutions to acquire them, but also in a building, it needs to be affordable to run. And I think that we need to avoid new big elephants in the room that would come from lack of considerations of interactions between heating system and a building. It was mentioned, and thanks for mentioning the peak load. I think this is underrated in the current circumstances. It has a cost, and it has a cost not only for the people in the buildings, but basically for all the sectors, basically because it drives the price of energy up, and that is becoming also harder to decarbonize than for industry. So the sort of systemic approach needs to be much higher on the agenda. And revisiting the very benefits of energy efficiency first in this particular geopolitical context would be very important.
For me, health protection is number one, and then energy saving. I think you understand what I mean.
Yes.
Domestic hot water, we have new technologies in the next years to go down with the temperatures, I think, easily and easy to implement, and also some measures to do this. And I think this will be one part of the solution, not all, to make the efficiency better from the heat pumps.
Thank you very much. Closing statement from Philippe from your side as well.
So I like very much the United Europe. So that's a good word to end up this discussion. I would say that we have a momentum nowadays. We have momentum and a lot of alignment of most member states, and we try to work with this to make the most of it and to decarbonize this.
Finally, Tomasz, what we need to do as HVAC engineers?
I think that we, as I said, should link more attention to education of people who will make this in practice, and we should not really be concentrated on specific solution regarding this heat sources like heat pumps, because all heat pumps, gas boilers, district heating, because also now I think that now where is the room for this? A lot of industries and a lot of research institutions work on new heat sources which will be available on the market to cover this. But we also, we should link more attention how such sources will be implemented in existing buildings. Yes, what for we should take care in order to proceed. Yes, we only should make some really small adjustment of existing system, which if they are in good condition, in order to proceed very fast in existing buildings, because the people do not allow us to move for maybe 2 years to make a modernization.
Thank you very much. And with this, I would like to thank all our panelists. And we heard, I think, very resonating statements regarding being united, using a European united approach, system level approach, training and installers and engineers alike. So with this, I think we can all agree in this room. And I would like to thank, and I would like to ask you to thank our panelists for their contribution, and hand over back to Jarek for closing remarks.
Pleasure. Here.
Yeah, okay. Maybe please just stay here, because audience did not have any chance for the questions. We still have about 15 minutes time left. If you want to ask any panelist, please use this opportunity. So Livio, you are overactive today. I need.
As always.
Yes.
No, I just would ask to more or less everyone. The point of sometimes it seems to me that we are coming back to reinvent the wheel. What I mean is that holistic design, for instance, is another way to say integrated design. I'm an old teacher and I'm always teaching that we have to design in an integrated way. That means the engineers at least are coming out knowing that the envelope before we have to reduce the energy needs, and then we move to the energy use through efficiency of the systems. Okay, and then we know that the balance is, at least at the engineering science, between increase of efficiency and cost increase. If the marginal cost is too high, forget to increase 0.001, the efficiency does make sense. This is the core of engineering. The main point seems to be to me that, first of all, we have to clarify what we're talking about sometime, because for instance, heat pump, there is a lot of different heat pump systems. There are heat pump systems which doesn't need electricity. We have thermal driven heat pump, can be intermediate solution using the gas pipeline we already have. There are, say, boiler firm working with small heat pump, just replacement of wall-mounted boilers for the intermediate period, for instance. And this can be then a transient, to get the final solution. Of course, we have to invest on the infrastructure. But in my country, I saw to grow up the gas infrastructure in 5 years. Then it's matter just to decide, politically decide to invest to increase, for instance, the electricity networks and to push for more renewable power station. Then there is behind our technical solution, which are on the field, because our data, when we are talking about thermal driven pump, we are talking about technology developed 40 years ago. I mean, solar driven heat pump. You can drive with 60 degrees C if you use absorption heat pump and so on. That's the point. Then from one side, we need to, this is right the point, to increase the knowledge of installers, because what I see the problem is in the lower level, because our experience with heat pump, for instance, that they think to use the heat pump as a boiler without taking care of the temperature level, and the control system is a failure, the control system, and that the system doesn't work correctly. Then teaching to the installer how to use the current technology. This is the first point. And the question is how you can think to try to solve this, because you cannot solve with labeling. You solve with some accreditation, for instance, at the European level. Have you working with this? This is a very important topic. And the other one is try to force EU country to invest on infrastructure, as was done, for instance, in Italy for the gas pipeline. Then you have greater freedom to try to fulfill our requirement for the future. It's, I think, impossible question, but.
Yeah, thanks. This was very complicated, but you want to say a word, please?
Yes, for the certification of heat pumps, it's already required in the REHVA Managing Director. And so it's already developing, I would say, for a few years. This was my main point. For the electricity, it's it depends on each nation, and depending on their plans to decarbonize, they will invest or not. The solution they have chosen. I can't say about that.
Yes. Very good, thanks. Any other questions, comments, or remarks by the audience? Yes, there is one.
Thanks. One point that is about energy efficiency is also the oversizing of the heat pumps, and this is something we didn't discuss also today, but what I see in France is that now we are not insulating the buildings, but we are moving, shifting to heat pumps, and I think that's mainly the same in all over Europe. So this is a problem of production, because we need to produce bigger heat pumps. So this is a problem of carbon because of the fluid, because of quantity of materials, and I'm not sure this is a real shift for carbon neutral, and this is a problem. and also about the working of the heat pumps when they are oversized for middle season. So I think this is something we could maybe discuss. I think the work of the task force is really interesting. It sounds good, and it's in line with my personal work about energy auditing. Today, the market is directed. The payback, the short payback, is the major things to make energy decrease. And maybe one thing is to say, okay, today short payback is good, and in 5 years the regulation will lead to insulate. So we discussed just before the problem of the short payback is when everything afterwards is expensive and more long payback. But here maybe it's the role of the regulation to say, today we need short payback because we need to make a real decrease. And we always speak about 10% of decrease of energy for this winter by saying we should hit 19 degrees. But if you look about intermittency, I don't know in English, just to say we stop to eat during the night, to stop to eat during the weekend, maybe it's 20, 30, 40% of eating gains that we can do already now. And I think this is the work of the task force also to explain that, and this is really interesting. I think one step further would be maybe this subject of oversizing to the shift. I don't know if we have something from somebody, sorry, from Daikin today. I don't know if you have a real position on this, because this impacts the market and this impacts the energy peak demand and consumption also.
Sure, yeah. I think I'm glad to give an answer on that, because we fully agree. And we see that most of the heat pumps in the market are oversized. And it's not because we like to earn more money and to sell bigger heat pump. That is not the reason. The reason is that, in fact, from the calculations, points and the safeties included, sizes are specified, which are in fact generating an overcapacity, which is very negative again for the electricity consumption, the energy consumption. Because in fact, although most of the heat pumps today are inverter driven, but at a certain point of time, they go into an on-off cycling. And this is also eating unnecessary electricity. So proper sizing is very important. But therefore also the standards that have been developed for EPBD are very important, that this is well absorbed in each of the member states, that people are prepared to do their calculations in a different way than they used to do. And of course, the background is clear. If you had a gas condensing boiler or a gas boiler in the past, it always had overcapacity. Yeah. So in that sense, it was not a point of concern. But today, it is absolutely a point of concern. And it can save money. If you do a proper sizing, you probably can use a smaller heat pump, and that is saving money. But so therefore, we fully support this remark. Yes.
Fully agree with all of that. There's two sides to the oversizing problem. One is this, that we have design and dimensioning protocols that automatically lead to oversizing and specification of too large equipment. And then there's what you mentioned, that we are fundamentally omitting the energy efficiency first principle. And this is one of the big concerns I have with the one-eyed idea of solving problems by banning a certain type of heating equipment. If you ban a technology, the easiest way for the consumer to comply with the ban is to do exactly that. Just exchange that piece of technology to something, but not improve the performance of the underlying building at all.
Yeah, so please go on, Céline.
Yes, just to say that I completely agree. For me, that's the elephant in the room of this conversation, this interaction between the buildings and that system. I just know that this has also surfaced in some of the discussions next to the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive negotiations, talking about heat pump ready buildings. So maybe that's something for a next round of discussions, and I'm not heat pump expert here. Just to say that this is very important in our view. And this links back with the energy system and the peak load and what's this then available in the energy system to meet that peak load. It's not necessarily decarbonized supply. So, I mean, just we need to square the circle, and for that have this whole building approach and energy system approach. And just to conclude that, I'm sure that in EuroACE, because we're working on our work plan for next year, this interaction between the systems, renewables, and the energy efficiency of the building and the building envelope will also be quite high on our agenda. So happy to prolong the conversation.
Yeah.
Yes, you are making already very good closing remarks, but maybe Thomas can also say a word before I will give to Henk. Yes, there was actually two questions I see targeted to Thomas. So first was with payback time by way up, and when the oversizing of the heat pumps. And I really think that all existing business concepts in the market today so that they just will go and replace the gas boiler with a heat pump, and demand will not be reduced. So it means that this heat pump is large, operates at high temperature. So this can be technically done, but when we will phase out the electricity capacity and all these issues, and this is really a challenge how to do this in very large scale in the future, when we want to take this next step from the condensing gas boilers. So maybe Thomas, you can also comment this aspect, how this has been taken in the guidance, what is under the preparation.
Okay, thank you, Jarek. Regarding this first report, which we are working on, so we have a draft. So we now reach the consensus between these 14 experts, which in terms of this report are really active. So it is not easy to reach consensus regarding Nordic country and South country. So, but we will try to manage. And we also have specific issue regarding oversizing of heat pumps. So we will also address this aspect, but in a general view, yeah, because we will not be specific on a specific solutions ready on which are available on the market, but which will be valid also for a future, yeah. But also regarding this, that somebody moved from gas boiler in not insulated building, when it is available and it is in line with law, which is valid in a specific country, the people act as according to the law. So if they are not educated and would not know that it is better to first make increase energy efficiency, make insulation, it should come from the law. In other way, they will act as they want, especially that the energy poverty now is quite very important issue, yeah. And when they would not have money to pay for a bills, how to make renovations without subsidies.
In fact, it's just also to come back on the previous remarks. And in fact, this is also a nice platform to challenge. And I think I would like to make two statements in order to challenge. It's on this, we discussed on the envelope, and that is bringing a certain need of that building. Also discussions with especially housing corporations, where they say, now let's create a box in the box. Why should we stick to the complete envelope of a building? And why don't we focus on the areas where people are really living? So we can have this box in box concept, make the investments far more affordable, have a proper sizing of the heat pump, and perhaps have, and that brings me to the second point, have a combination with another source of heat, and that could be the old condensing gas condensing boiler, then still used for hot domestic water, but could also be an air-to-air heat pump, just in the areas where by time to time, like in the sleeping room, where the son or the daughter is then studying for a couple of hours, you are heating up. But I think in most countries, this is not foreseen in the building legislation. No, you have to keep it strict to this envelope. So I think it's also, it should trigger us. How can we be more creative? I think it was with perhaps with the dinner with Livio discussing, okay, in the student houses in the old days, you were sitting in front of a stove and heating up in front of you. Not that that is the comfort level and the health levels we are looking at, but it is a way of thinking, okay, why should we stick to this principle? And then also look into the hybrid solutions, and then not hybrid just as always water-based, because we used to have a gas boiler, so it must be a water-based distribution and emission system. No, that can be other systems as well, and also from the generator side. Therefore also mentioning the air-to-air heat pump. So you have more possibilities, and in that case also schedule the investments and make the affordability, bringing that closer. But that's more a remark to challenge you all. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. Now we are already very close to closing of a seminar, but maybe as one closing remark would be that we see how many technical possibilities there are available already today, where some of these are perhaps very new and innovative solutions. Some of them have been available for a long time, and there is no single solution how to make this improvement. So in that respect, I think what the work what has done with Ecodesign and to go on with one single energy label scale, what would be actually technology neutral, that's perhaps the best way how to go. And as a professionals, we really can support this type of technology neutral approach instead of banning something. But maybe one final question regarding this Ecodesign. Is there any plan still to have some biomass label factor to make a distinction between different type of boilers? If you have a gas boiler or if you have a pellet boiler, then if no biomass label factor would not be taken into account, then very likely this performance of a pellet boiler will not as good as even a condensing gas boiler. So Philippe, maybe you can address also this question.
Yes, so the eco-design of solid fuel and boilers and stoves will start this year, the review study and the impact assessment. And indeed, they have, for the solid fuel boilers, they have a specific scale, which is, in fact, the same scale, but they have this biomass factor to be above fossil fuels. So this is clearly one point that will be discussed, and there are clearly two options: or you have a separate scale and you keep it, or you put it together with the others. If you put it with the others, probably it means that you don't have the biomass factor. If you are alone, then you don't have the problem. But this is to be discussed. I cannot answer today. This will be the subject of the 2 years to come.
Yeah, and this brings me to, I would say, a final closing remark. So in the morning there was quite a many presentations about the EPBD, and we noticed how complex document it is, and how much these let's say European ambition has been debated, and somebody say that it's over ambitious, and somebody say that it's too low ambition when going to this renovation, and let's say new ambition to go to a carbon neutral building stock in Europe by 2050. So this is very hard discussion, and we also recognized that it's not so easy to read this directive to end up with very basic principles like this energy efficiency first principle, that first you need to reduce the consumption, and then with this remaining consumption you need to cover as much as possible by the renewable energy. But in principle, yes, if very carefully followed the directive, this is possible to do. And we also noticed that in the directive there is a banning of fossil fuels on site, what is actually not technology neutral, because at the same time fossil fuels are still there in the district heating production. When we speak about peaks in the district heating, it's very likely with natural gas still for a long time, and also in the electricity production. So indeed, it's possible to say that in the building, you don't need to apply any more fossil fuels because there are so many other technologies present. But when we notice, for instance, with core generation appliances are still fossil fuel operated and could have quite a high efficiency in this single label scale. So these questions are not too straightforward, and we can expect that the discussion and handling EPBD in the parliament, perhaps some of these issues could be addressed, and then it would be easier to apply also in the member states, and perhaps could be a step towards a common market in Europe, when it is also more easy to deliver all these and to have a delivery capacity of all these technical solutions and installations needed in the future. But now I think it's time to close our seminar. I would like to thank our panelists for active discussion, and thanks for all of the audience for active attendance as well. So the seminar is closed. Thank you.
Thank you.